cowboys, horse rides, and epic shootouts. That's what comes to mind when we think of the Wild West, right? But hold your horses. There's a much stinkier side to this story. Hygiene, practically non-existent. Women had it especially rough. No clean running water, yet they still had to figure out how to stay clean. And get this, Lysol wasn't just for cleaning your counters. It was actual medical treatment. Shocking? Oh, it gets weirder. Buckle up as we dive into 10 shocking hygiene practices of the Wild West in today's video. Number 1. Families bathed in the same bathwater. Bath time in the Wild West wasn't a bubbly, relaxing spa experience like we have today. It was a very dirty ordeal altogether, as clean water was hard to come by in the harsh environment of the West, and heating it up for a nice warm bath was even harder. So families would make do by sharing the same tub of bathwater. First up was dad, then mom, and then the kids in order of age. By the time the youngest hopped in, the water was more dirt soup than clean soak. Imagine washing your face in water that's already scrubbed someone else's feet. Yeah, sounds disgusting. On top, they didn't even bathe every day. Once a week was considered ambitious. And if you thought that this water has had enough users, think again. The pioneers even used that water to do their laundry. No wonder that time was full of cases of cholera and dysentery. Number 2. Toilets were outhouses. When nature called in the Wild West, you didn't head to a sparkling porcelain throne. All you had was a shabby and unclean outhouse. A hole would be dug and a wooden structure erected above it. And no plumbing meant that it wasn't just smelly, it was a breeding ground for flies, maggots, and disease. If you were unlucky enough to need the loo at night, you'd have to brave the dark, creepy crawlies, and whatever animals lurked nearby. Outhouses also froze in winter and stank worse than a cattle ranch in summer. If that wasn't bad enough, some people didn't even have outhouses. They used bushes, streams, or even chamber pots to do their business, which of course had to be dumped out by hand. Number 3. Strange toilet paper alternatives. Toilet paper wasn't a thing in the Wild West, so folks had to get creative. Most used what was readily available, and the options were unpleasant. Corn cobs were popular. Yes, actual cobs, which were surprisingly effective at the job, but let's be honest, not exactly comfortable. Others opted for handfuls of grass, leaves, or even moss. But these came with risks. Poisonous plants like poison ivy or nettles could turn responding to nature's call into a nightmare. Wealthier folks or those in towns used old newspapers, catalogs, or magazine papers. The Sears catalog was a favorite because its pages were thin and plentiful. The first official toilet paper only appeared in 1857, invented by Joseph Gaiety. His medicated paper claimed to prevent hemorrhoids, but it was single sheets, not a roll, and was too expensive for most. Real toilet paper became commercially available not until the 1920s. Number 4. Lack of women's hygiene. Women in the Wild West faced an uphill battle when it came to hygiene. Menstruation was a complete ordeal, with no pads or tampons. Instead, women used rags, moss, or nothing at all. These makeshift solutions led to discomfort, infections, and even life-threatening conditions. Bathing was a luxury, as water was scarce and heating it was labor-intensive. When women did try to clean up, they often had to do it in springs or streams, where privacy was non-existent. Imagine trying to bathe while constantly watching over your shoulder for wandering men, animals, or even other settlers passing by. Plus, it wasn't a clean place and dirt was everywhere, so it left them dealing with odors and skin issues. Pregnancy brought even more risks. There was no sterilization, and childbirth often took place on dirty beds or floors, increasing the chance of deadly infections. Layers of heavy dresses trapped sweat and dirt, and corsets rubbed against unwashed skin, creating sores. Number 5. Bug-infested bed made of straw. Sleeping in the Wild West wasn't as romantic as Hollywood makes it seem. Beds were often just wooden frames stuffed with straw, hay, or dried grass, and these materials were magnets for bugs. Bed bugs, lice, and fleas infested the bedding. turning sleep into a nightly horror show. Bites left people itchy and sore, but the bugs carried a darker threat: diseases like typhus and trench fever. Cleaning these straw mattresses was nearly impossible, and washing meant hauling buckets of water and scrubbing by hand. So most folks gave up and lived with the infestation. The heat and lack of ventilation only made things worse, as sweat and body oil soaked into the straw, creating an awful smell. By morning, beds were often crawling with critters, but for the people in the Wild West, I guess it was better than sleeping on the hard floor. Before we dig into more of the Wild West's jaw-dropping hygiene practices, and yes, the unbelievable use of Lysol as a medical treatment, could you do me a quick favor? Hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. It only takes 2 seconds, and trust me, it's way easier than living back then. Thanks a lot. Now let's get back to the wild and slightly gross details. Number 6. Bars were filled with bad quality liquor and towels full of bacteria. Saloons in the Wild West were rowdy, chaotic, and unbelievably filthy. Plus, the booze served at the facilities was often so low quality that they named it rot gut or firewater. These concoctions weren't just watered down, they were spiked with additives like methanol, turpentine, or tobacco juice to stretch the booze supply and add a kick. They rarely cleaned their glasses, and when the rowdy cowboys drank wildly, they would wipe their beards with bacteria-filled towels. Speaking of towels, these multi-purpose rags were used for everything, from mopping sweat to cleaning spills and wiping dirty tables. And since there wasn't enough water, cleaning the towels was a rare case. This would become bacteria breeding grounds, spreading germs faster than a saloon fight. People would normally spit out tobacco on the floors, and they had a vessel called spittoons to catch the spits. But it didn't happen all the time, and the floors would have sawdust to soak it up. This caused the sawdust to harbor bacteria and caused diseases like pneumonia and tuberculosis. Number 7. Use of Lysol for treating infections. Lysol is actually what you spray to clean countertops, but what if I told you back in the Wild West it was used as a medical treatment? That's right, folks. Women desperate to prevent infections after childbirth or freshen up used Lysol, believing it was a miracle product. Instead, it caused burns, irritation, and sometimes deadly poisoning. But wait, it gets worse. Some people even used Lysol as a DIY birth control method, which didn't work. The chemicals in early Lysol were incredibly harsh and were more suited to scrubbing floors than touching human skin. Doctors back then didn't know better, so they recommended it for everything from disinfecting wounds to curing STDs. Imagine the pain of pouring industrial cleaner on an open cut or using it for feminine hygiene. Ouch! Number 8. Cocaine and aspirin were common medicines. Back then, medicine was more trial and error than proven science, and some of the remedies are just so shocking for us today. For example, cocaine was a go-to drug for everything from toothaches to depression. Literally. It was available over the counter and marketed as a miracle cure. Dentists used it as a local anesthetic during tooth extractions or dental surgeries. It was applied directly to gums or injected, and worked quickly to dull the throbbing pain sensation. Parents even gave it to teething babies. Can you imagine? Aspirin was another household staple, though early versions were unregulated and often contained impurities. Snake oil salesmen sold cocaine-laced tonics as energy boosters, promising to cure anything from fatigue to arthritis. People trusted these remedies, not knowing they were addictive or harmful. Cocaine wasn't actually outlawed until the early 1900s, so for decades, it was a staple in medical kits. Number 9. Whiskey was often a meal. In the Wild West, they loved their booze, and so much so that sometimes it would replace a whole meal. You heard that right, folks. Whiskey wasn't just a drink, it was survival in a bottle. Food was often scarce, expensive, or hard to prepare, especially for cowboys on long cattle drives or settlers in remote areas. So what they did was they found a quick substitute that offered warmth, energy, and a false sense of fullness. Whiskey lacked any quality ingredients, but was readily available, so people would gulp it down for a meal sometimes, and that led to malnutrition, dehydration, and addiction. People believed that whiskey could ward off illnesses, warm them in freezing weather, and boost morale after a hard day. Number 10. Soaps were made from animal fat. Soap in the Wild West wasn't the lavender-scented luxury we know today. It was homemade, rough, and mostly made from animal fat. Settlers would save leftover fat from slaughtered livestock, mix it with lye, which is a caustic substance made from wood ash, and boil it down. The result was a greasy, foul-smelling bar that was more effective at removing skin than dirt. This soap was harsh and often caused irritation or burns if not prepared properly. It was used for everything: washing clothes, scrubbing floors, and cleaning bodies. People rarely bathe, so one bar lasted a long time. Women typically took on soap making, and accidents were common. Lye could burn skin or blind the worker if mishandled. Despite its flaws, soap was a lifeline in the fight against grime. So tell me, aren't you feeling thankful you were born in a time when we have every hygiene facility available? I know I am. I hope you found this video interesting. Now watch this video on the screen and I'll see you there.